Hey everybody, Resident Loser Jeremy here. This is going to be the second video in the Opening a Studio series, I guess it is now, where we're going to talk about payment and pricing, how to price yourself for your market, how to get your clients to pay. Let's go. So like I said in the first one, and if you haven't seen it, I'm gonna link it right up here. But in my first video where I talk about opening a recording studio, the things I wish people had told me, I got a staggering amount of messages from you guys who are opening a recording studio, whether it's commercial or in your own home, for a couple of different reasons. Maybe it's a career choice and this is just the right time to do it. But there's a fair bit of you who your hand is kind of being forced into this. I know it's scary, I know it's a big deal, stuff's unpredictable, but it can happen. You can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. Go back to that first video, how to turn a hobby into a career, if you want to hear kind of my backstory on this. It may make some of this make a little more sense. But in this one, I'm going to talk about how to price yourself and how to get your clients to actually pay. Pricing yourself. This is going from the perspective of you really don't have a ground of work to stand upon. And if you do, you're going to be starting in a different place. When you're first starting out, you need to take a look at everything that's happening around you. If you really don't have a ground of work to stand upon outside of your own material that you've recorded and the projects that you've worked with a band, maybe, you need to price low. Take a look at your competition, take a real hard look at the sounds of your mixes versus the sounds of their mixes. And this is where it really takes some internal reflection. You have to be honest with yourself. Maybe ask some friends to give their honest opinion. What does this sound like versus this person? What do I sound like versus this person? And then take into account the things you can do. Can you record a full band? Can you only record one person at a time? Then price yourself accordingly. If your competition can record a full band, they have awesome gear, their mixes sound incredible, and their day rate's $400 a day. Your stuff sounds really good, decent, but you can only record one person at a time. Your facilities aren't as band friendly. Maybe you start 50, 75, 100 a day. There's a few reasons for that. You're not gonna have nearly the overhead that a studio does. And at the same time, a client's not gonna pay more to work with somebody with less of a stellar output. The equipment is not necessarily the thing. Your equipment's tools. I don't care what body shop I go to or what tools that they have there, as long as my car gets fixed. And frankly, I don't care if it's cheaper or more expensive. If I will pay a higher price if my car will drive by the end of it. I will also pay a cheaper price if my car will drive by the end of it. Kind of the same thing applies to a recording studio. If you're looking at your competition, price yourself realistically next to them. One thing to think about, the further along you get this, you cannot constantly try to undercut your competition. If you do that for your entire career, you're going to be the Walmart of recording studios. There's a few reasons that that's a bad idea. You're not going to grow that way. You're not going to grow as an engineer. You're not going to get better clientele doing it like that. You're not going to get better equipment that way. Not that the equipment makes the engineer. I don't think that at all. However, there is something to be said about working on good equipment and what that can teach you about sound in general. If you're constantly the discount studio or the discount mixer or the discount master, you're not going to get that respect from your clientele. You're not going to get those people who want to come back with you every time. You're going to get those people who are looking for the cheapest recording studio. And trust me, those are not the loyal individuals that you want for a long-term career. It's a good way to start. It's a good way to cut your teeth. It's a good way to learn, but it's not a good way to maintain a long-term career on. For me, at this point, I do not work on something unless it's paid for. I don't start a mix unless that mix is paid for. I won't book a band unless they pay 25% for the deposit. There's a lot of reasons for that. If a band doesn't show up, I know at least I'm gonna be paid for that day, even if I can't get another band in at the time. A few things happen when you ask somebody to pay in advance, and I realize this is not gonna happen right off the bat for a lot of you. Try to keep this as a target for the future. A few things happen when you ask somebody to pay a deposit. If somebody's already invested in a process, it's going to be much easier to get a hold of them and get the things that you need because they know they've already invested in. For example, if you need demos, if you need reference tracks, if you just need to talk to somebody about a change, it's a lot easier to get them on the phone than if they haven't paid a deposit. I'm not really sure why that is, but that's been my experience every single time. I hate being ghosted, and the biggest way to not be ghosted is to take their money right off the bat. Again, that's not going to happen in the beginning, but this is something to look for. And as soon as you see an opportunity to start doing this, and you get people asking you to record, that's the perfect situation. It's not really something you should ask from a band if you're going out and pursuing, which is what's going to happen when you first start this out. If you're asking a band to record and you're going out and doing all this recruiting, it's really hard then to turn around and say, okay, well, I'm gonna need $100 to get you guys on the books. That's a little shady. That's very used car salesman if you don't have a relationship established, or if they're not approaching you for your services based on your expertise that they can already see. So again, that's what I do. I rarely have a cancellation in the rare event that it's an emergency. Obviously, what's been going on with everything right now has affected some of that, but people have rescheduled, and I really haven't technically lost any money in the deposit world. That said, don't ever spend a deposit that hasn't then come in to record. If you need to give it back, you need to have it. So another way to make the payment and everything as smooth as possible is to be as transparent as possible. Websites are cheap. Websites are super cheap. Having something more than a Facebook is huge here. I use Squarespace because it's super easy to get a website up and going. It is legitimately what I use for all of my websites now. I've used a lot of different ones, and I legitimately like this one the best. On that website, you need to have clear prices listed. Always be transparent with your clients as far as what this is going to cost them. Let them know ahead of time. If something changes, there could be a reflection in the price that will change. I offer unlimited mix revisions. Maybe you don't. Let them know that if they go beyond 2 or 3 mix revisions, this is how much it's going to cost. I charge a day rate in the studio. Maybe you're going to charge half days. Maybe you're going to charge 5-hour blocks. Figure out what that is and advertise it and put it somewhere so that when you get somebody on the phone and they talk to you, you can talk price, but you can also say, well, go check out the website. You could, if you need to reference this again, there's the prices. It does a couple things. It makes you seem trustworthy, be that you're not just making up prices on the spot, different for everybody else, but it also kind of does the work for you. You can tell them in the initial conversation what something's going to cost, but then they can go back and figure out what they want to do in your studio based on the prices because you have it all laid out for them. And they can pick and choose the different services that you offer. And then when you come back and have that other conversation, now you have a really clear idea of what they want, what you want, and nobody's stressed out about money because everybody understands it. I use PayPal for all of my invoicing, and I love it. Since I've started doing this, payment has been super easy for me. PayPal credit is fantastic for a recording studio, especially if you're working for independent artists who aren't bankrolled by a label, which happens, but it is less and less common. Even for signed bands now, that's not so much the case. They're paying you out of their own pocket. Offering PayPal credit is kind of like the new record label. You can bankroll your project as long as the band has good credit, or if someone in the band has decent enough credit to get approved. You can charge what you would normally charge for a record, record the album, mix the album, get it pressed, and then let them start selling that record to pay back PayPal, essentially. So how PayPal credit works, you send the bill, they click pay later, PayPal pays you the full amount, minus some PayPal fees, but still, you get paid. That band, then the clock starts ticking as far as how they can pay that back with no interest. And a lot of times for me, we're getting the project out, they have records in hand, and they're starting to sell stuff, sell merch, play shows, and pay back the recording process with the actual product. Sometimes that's better than what a label is going to give that band, better than a few deals I've seen labels give bands. Anyway, PayPal is a really good way to do your invoicing because it keeps track of everything for you, keeps your list of clients is really well organized. You can organize your services. It looks professional. It keeps track of everything. Honestly, it's my favorite way to do invoicing. And I pay for other bookkeeping software that'll do it for me, and it pays a premium for it, where PayPal's free, minus the fees they charge you when you get paid like that. One thing here, don't ever force anyone to pay you via friends and family. One, that can seem really shady, and two, you kind of lose out on some protection that can be there for both the seller and the buyer. So if I charge somebody $1,000 for a record, PayPal's gonna take out $29.30 is what it looks like. I'm happy to pay PayPal that amount of money for the ease that the payment process has. I'm not paying credit card fees. Everything is so streamlined and all in one place. I'm happy to pay it. So look at PayPal. Something to think about, especially early on. don't give up the files until it's paid for. That's the only real leverage you have. This is one of those every rule is meant to be broken rules, and you have to look at this on a case-by-case basis. Maybe if you really trust someone, you can give those files away knowing that they're gonna come back on Friday with their paycheck and pay you. That's something you have to decide for yourself. And this is something different for everybody in different steps of their career. For me, I won't really give out a file unless it's paid for, unless I really, really, really know that person and I trust them, and we have a good working relationship. For you, that may be different, but it's something that you work towards. So keep that in mind. The files are the only real leverage you have here. That said, if someone is paid up on their tracking, you charge to record, maybe they haven't paid for the mix yet, but they've paid for the actual recording process with you, they made the songs, and they ask for their files back, give them the files. They're their files, they paid for them, give them the files. I know some people will disagree with me here, this is kind of a hot button issue. They paid for them, they deserve to have them. So pricing is going to be constantly a trial and error thing. Even for me, where I'm at right now, I'm always looking at my prices. If you want to kind of internet stalk me, find my recording studio's page and look at my pricing list, you can. Some of my services I'm looking at changing the price of, because the more I'm getting asked to do it, the more I'm beating out people who are charging a little more. And so I'm looking at changing, especially my mastering cost. So it's always something that you're evaluating and changing based on the demand of your services and the quality of your services. And the only real thing you have to go off there is what your clients are telling you and how busy you are. Once I found the sweet spot for me, I've stayed there as far as like recording cost and my day rate at the studio, and I don't really see that changing. Mixing cost and mastering cost, that's where I see things that are constantly in flux. So I don't feel like as soon as you set your price that you're stuck there. Quite the contrary, anytime that I've raised my prices, and this is totally true in the 10 years that I've had this recording studio, anytime that I've raised my prices, I've had a better year. It's nerve-wracking every time you do it. Trust me, I feel like I'm gonna lose all of my clients if I raise my prices. I've done better every single time that I've raised my prices. And I think it's because, one, I'm valuing my time. Two, I'm not so worried about the clock in every project that I'm doing, so I can do better work. And all of that compounds. I'm doing better work, so I get better clients with better songs, which makes better mixes, and it just kind of keeps snowballing. So it's gonna constantly change. Know that going into it. Know that you're gonna reevaluate this a few times through your career, but you're gonna have to start lower than you'd like to, probably, and then go from there. The better work you can do for cheaper, the faster you will grow. But don't undercut for too long. Don't be the discount store of recording studios. So hopefully that was some idea into payment and pricing. I can get a little more specific into this if there are questions. I don't want to get too specific. That way not everybody watching a YouTube video prices exactly the same. That's not really my goal here. If you guys want to reach out, you've been sending great questions. I love it. Let's get involved. Ultimately, starting this business, don't be afraid to plug yourself. Speaking of which, if you want to work with me and you're opening a recording studio and you think I might have some knowledge I can help you with, you can hire me to consult. Ooh, that feels weird. Still learning to do it even 10 years in. Go to my website, recordingstudioloser.com. You can hire me for mixing, mastering. Check out the shop where you can find drum samples, guitar impulses, all that fun stuff. If you guys have any specific questions, let me know. These are gonna kind of be driven by you guys. I made these first 2 videos based on questions that I received. Like I said, you guys hunted me down on Facebook. You came to my website, you filled out my contact forms. You're asking fantastic questions, and it was to the point where there were so many people asking questions, I needed to make a video on it. If you guys want me to get more specific on this stuff, let me know. If you have any other topics you want me to cover, please let me know. If you guys like this one, hit the like button. Consider subscribing because we do this all the time. If you want, while you're down there, hit the bell so you're notified every time I put out a video. I'm Resident Loser Jeremy. I'll see you guys in the next one.
It's something about us, something about